Every move I make, I make in you. You make me move, Jesus. Every breath I breathe in you. Every breath I take in you. You are my way, Jesus. Every breath I breathe in you. Every move I make in you. You make me move, Jesus. Every breath I breathe in you. Every step I take in you. You are my way, Jesus. Every breath I breathe in you. Oh, waves of mercy, waves of grace. Everywhere I look, I see your face. Love has captured me. Oh my God, this love, how can it be? Waves of mercy, waves of grace. Everywhere I look, I see your face. Your love has captured me. Oh my God, this love, how can it be?
Make me broken so I can be healed. 'Cause I'm so calloused and now I can't feel. I wanna run to you with heart wide open. Make me broken. Make me empty so I can be filled. 'Cause I'm still holding onto my will, and I'm completed when you are with me. Make me empty till you are my one desire, till you are my one true love, till you are my breath and my everything. Lord, please keep making me. Make me lonely so I can be yours, till I want no one more than you, Lord. 'Cause in the darkness I know you will hold me. Make me lonely till you are my one desire, till you are my one true love, till you are my breath and my everything. Lord, please keep making me. Till you are my one desire, till you are my one true love, till you are my breath and my everything. Lord, please keep making. I know you'll keep making. Lord, please keep making me.
that are shaken and stirred can be calmed and broken from my regard. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all, it is well. And through it all, my eyes are on you, and it is well with me. Far be it from me to not believe, even when my eyes can't see. And this mountain that's in front of me will be thrown into the midst of the sea. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all, it is well. And through it all, my eyes are on you, and it is well. It is well. So let it go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name. So let it go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name. So let it go, my soul, and trust in Him. The waves and wind still know His name. The waves and wind still know His name. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. it is well with me.
So this week we've finished Luke chapter 17. We'll start Luke 18. As we turn to chapter 18, I want you to remember that in the original text that we didn't have the chapter and paragraph divisions like we have now. Those have been added for us. So what I want you to see is the conversations that begin in chapter 17 are continuing in chapter 18. In the original, there was no chapter break here at all. And what we're seeing and looking at in chapter 17 was this discussion that Jesus was having mostly with the Pharisees about the kingdom of God. You remember they were tiring of Jesus and they were saying basically put up or shut up. You keep talking about the kingdom of God. If you're claiming to be the Messiah, if this is indeed true, then show us the kingdom. Bring the kingdom now is where the discussion was going. And now the context has changed a little bit. And we can know who Jesus is talking to as we start chapter 18 by looking back at 17:22, where it says, and he said unto his disciples. So Jesus was talking to the Pharisees. He left off that. He turned to his disciples. He began saying to his disciples, the days will come when you shall desire to see one of the days of the Son of Man, and you won't see it. You're saying things are going to get bad, and you'll long for these days when I was with you. Because Jesus knew that persecution, he was going to Jerusalem at this time to be persecuted. And he knew persecution wasn't only coming for him, but it was also right behind him. It was coming for his disciples as well. And beyond him, for every other person who would pick up their own crosses, even for a couple of thousand years, it's coming to Christians even today. So we rejoin the scripture today with Jesus right here speaking to his disciples and sharing with them his desires that they'd learn to be a people of prayer. And that's just where I said we're going as a church. We're becoming people more and more of prayer. That he desired that his followers would be people of prayer so they wouldn't fall into discouragement. Verse 1 of chapter 18, it says, and he spake a parable unto them to this end, that men ought always to pray and not faint. I love that Jesus so often taught in parables so that we of simple minds can more easily understand. Again, times of trouble were coming to his followers, and Jesus knew that trouble meant that his followers were going to have to be more and more and more convicted, more and more people given to prayer. That without prayer, that we would be easy targets for the enemy. And what Jesus presents here as a parable of contrast. It's not comparing, it's a parable of contrast. Just as the life of the believer should stand in sharp contrast to lives of unbelievers. That the life of the believer should be so much in prayer that it stands in contrast to even the beginning believer, the shallow, underdeveloped believer. That your life should be a life of prayer that is in stark contrast to those who claim even to be Christians that are never in prayer. We'll see in this parable that Jesus suggests that a person should pray as often as he has opportunity. And that's where we fail. Do you pray as often as you have opportunity? And I think the answer, if you'll be honest with yourself, is no. The point Jesus will make is that we should constantly be coming to the throne of grace with request, continually putting up our request to God. You see, man was created for a relationship. And as I've told you over and over, a relationship requires conversation. That man was created not just for a relationship, but specifically, he was created for a relationship with God. And God built into us this natural inclination toward prayer that we suppress. We suppress it because we think people will think we are foolish. But yet even the unbeliever in a split second before tragedy is about to strike, just before the truck hits him broadside, is prone to cry out, "Dear God." Even the unbeliever. But we get so busy and we lose focus. And in our busyness, too often we fail to place God on the throne of our daily lives. Too often our prayer life falls silent. Our prayer altars go cold. We stop praying. I find myself there sometimes. Oh my gosh, I don't think I've hoisted a prayer to God for 2 or 3 days. How bad I feel. I've been neglecting my God. This is where we're at. We don't live our lives in frequent and constant prayer. I think if we're not there, if that's not how we're living our lives, if we're not as Christians, as believers in frequent prayer, then I think we're neglecting our responsibility to our Creator. If we're not often in prayer as believers, we're missing the mark. And we know that in the Bible, to miss the mark is sin. I think it's fair to say that if we're not often in prayer, we're sinning toward God, that we're violating our relationship, we're neglecting it. And that hurts. Sin's not just what you do. Sometimes sin's what you don't do. There's sins of commission, there's sins of omission. And if you're omitting God, what a sin that is. If you're omitting God from your life. Now, Jesus is not saying that we should be like monks, that we're always on our knees, we always have our eyes closed, we don't do anything else. We let every responsibility of life slide, we don't work because we're so wrapped up in prayer. That's not what Jesus is saying at all. But we need to be so often in our lives praying. That we need to be sometimes, and I do this myself, oftentimes it's under your breath. Gwen gave us a good example during worship this morning of something she did. Sometimes it's when you're walking into a situation, just under your breath between you and God, you say, God, I need you in this. Dear Lord, I don't know what's on the other side of the door, but I need you in this. If you want Jesus in your every situation, you need to engage him in conversation about your every situation. I'm an insufficient stand-in for Jesus, but if you want me as the pastor of your church involved in the stuff of your life, you got to tell me about it. If you want Jesus Christ involved in every day of your life, you got to tell him what's going on. Not that he doesn't know, but he wants that relationship. He wants the conversation. The Apostle Paul encourages in this direction, 1 Thessalonians 5:17, where he wrote, pray without ceasing. And we should be constant prayer givers. And I think we simply don't know what good it would do if we were always in prayer. We can't know what harm would be averted from us if we were always in prayer. What if you verbally engaged God in your every situation? What bad situation would be turned to your favor? I don't know. I'm confident that there are many. So Jesus here encourages us not to faint, don't lose heart, don't get discouraged. As he encourages here in that direction, that should push your view right back to the faith as a mustard seed, shouldn't it? The beginning of the last chapter, the beginning of this conversation. That if you're often in prayer, you'll be developing this faith that's never discouraged, a faith that doesn't even bother accessing the obstacles, a faith that doesn't know for an answer, a faith that doesn't size up the opposition, a faith that pushes ahead. But this isn't easy. What I'm suggesting, what Jesus suggests here, isn't easy. It takes a lot of work. Prayer is a lot of work. It takes determination. You know, the marathon runner doesn't just decide one day they're going to run a marathon. It takes determination. Misty says, no, it doesn't. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of practice. And that's the same with prayer. In Colossians 4:12, the Apostle Paul praised a man named Epaphras because he was always laboring fervently in prayer. It's difficult. Prayer is labor. And engages you body, soul, and spirit as you verbally submit your will to that of the Father's. Prayer's hard because the devil hates it. Satan absolutely hates you having a conversation with God. He hates it. And because he hates it so badly, so much, he will either distract you from it or he'll discourage you from it. One or the other, he doesn't care. If he just gets you to shut up. And maybe he'll have somebody ring your phone or your doorbell when you're in prayer. Distractions come. You know, I'm not proud of all the things that I did as a child, but I will tell you that when I was a kid, after my parents had been divorced for a while, a guy named Will started calling on my mother. And I didn't want her having a relationship with this guy because it would have affected me. You see, Satan doesn't want you having a relationship with Jesus Christ because it affects him. Well, this Will, I remember he was a horseman. He's a guy who liked horses. And one day he and my mom were down in our barn looking at the barn. And that day I hid in the cornfield and I started lobbing dirt clods at the barn. I wasn't the brightest kid. I'm sure they knew who was throwing dirt clods at me. But I wanted to present a relationship, so I presented a distraction. And this is how it works. Sometimes when you're talking to God, that old devil who doesn't want you in a relationship with God because it affects him starts pelling you with dirt clods. Have you been hit with any dirt clods? I've been hit with a few myself. But then it occurs to me that maybe you're not as sharp as my mother and the cowboy was. Because you never seem to figure it out. Instead, you just shrug your shoulders and you stop praying. You're not determined. You don't push through. You know, my tactics weren't the most brilliant, but you know, maybe they were effective. A relationship never developed between my mother and that man. I wonder if you're so dissuaded from God so easily. God forbid you be moved away from God that easily. You know, if prayer were powerless, it would be so easy for us. If prayer were powerless, then we have no opposition. But prayer has power. But as Christians, too often, we're not convinced of the power of prayer. We're not convinced of it. We do it sometimes because we think we ought. But we're not convinced. At least that's what our actions suggest. If you were convinced of the power and effectiveness of prayer, it wouldn't so often be your last resort. It more often would be your first resource. You would be frequently in prayer, talking between yourself and God as you walk with your eyes open. I'm not talking drop to your knees and pray. I'm talking to have a conversation. As I said before, God, I don't know what lays on the other side of that door for me, what this situation is going to be, but I need you in it. I need you to guide me. I need your wisdom. I need your knowledge. And the point that Jesus makes in this parable, the thing he wants you to know is that you as a believer in him, you as a follower in him should be persistent in prayer and not give up. That you shouldn't be feeling dejected because you don't seem to ever get the answer. How many people have you heard say, I pray all the time, I've never had an answer? Is that God's fault or theirs? You pray all the time, you never really believe that God would do anything. Verse 1, it says, and he spake a parable to this end, that men ought always to pray and not faint, saying, there was in a city a judge which feared not God, neither regarded man. So here we are presented in this parable with a man, this judge, who was not swayed by God's opinion, nor man's opinion. He was going to do what was right in his own eyes, what suited him. Now, if you look back into the Old Testament at the qualifications to be a judge, this man was not qualified to be a judge since he had no fear of God. He was not at all qualified. He had no regard for man. He shouldn't have been a judge. But this is our tendency. We have this tendency to put people in positions despite their standing with God. And then we're so surprised by the outcome. We're so surprised when our society is sliding into the gutter. How could this have happened? Because Christians go to the voting booth and they pull levers and they don't care if the person they're voting to has any belief in God at all. It's like it's two separate issues. Yeah, I know he doesn't have any belief in God, but I think he's best to lead our country. How can that be? How in the world can that be? No fear of God. You know, the fear of God is one of the first things a person gains once they've been born again, once they've been saved. It becomes evident in the human life in a growing hatred for sin. It becomes evident in a doing of selfless duties for the kingdom. Selflessness for the kingdom of God. But most people today say there is no God. That's where most people are at. There is no God. And they live their lives as if there is no God. And they want so desperately for you to fall into disbelief because your faith is condemning to them. So they run their mouths continually against heaven, acting as ministers of darkness. And you being a minister of light, you shut up. They constantly deny God's providence. They despise his word. They proudly talk about their sin. How many people you know that so proudly every week talk about their sin? And I went to the bar this week and I got totally wasted. I did this, I did that. I acted a fool. And it's so funny. They glory. They glory in their sin. They promise themselves there is no judgment coming. We'll eat, drink, and be merry because there's nothing beyond. If you as a Christian tell them there's a judgment coming, they'll laugh. Yeah, I'm going to go to hell and there's going to be a great party because all my friends are going to be there. You've all heard that. Pity them. In this parable, we are presented with a judge that was in all ways unfit for the job, with no regard for the opinions of men. No regard for God. He simply ruled as he saw fit. He didn't care about what anyone said about him. He didn't care what his reputation was. He didn't care about his character. He had none of this to lose. Verse 3. says, and there was a widow in that city, and she came unto him, saying, avenge me of mine adversary. So here into the parable comes this widow. She's poor and helpless. Being a widow, she has no man to stand up for her, no man to present her case. And I want you to see this, because this widow in this parable represents you and I. She represents the church as the world turns so hard against God and turns so hard against His church, turns so hard against us. And it seems like in the world there's no one to represent us. And Christians are becoming more and more persecuted and helpless and desolate around the world. We're becoming a forlorn people. Christ is the bridegroom. The church is His bride. He's our husband. But in this period of grace while He's away, it's in the world it's as if though the church has become a widow. In some regard. I mean, we have His Spirit. What more can we want? But in some regard, in context of this parable. As the world turns more and more hostile against Christianity, Christians cry out to God for justice. In verse 3 again, the woman cried, avenge me of my adversary. It's a cry of the church. It's a cry of Christians today. Avenge us of our adversary. And we as Christians have no shortage of adversaries, and some start within us. You heard it said we're our own worst enemy. Sometimes that's true of us. We have so much sin and so much corruption within our own hearts. Things that we hold on to, God's one to forget, but yet we hold on to, and things that keep us away from Him. Satan and his demonic angels work against us continually. As I said, the wicked people who you live amongst, ministers of darkness. They work to discourage you. Now, we could, as a church, as Christians, we could pray and ask God constantly for vengeance. We say, God, strike them down. But it's better to plead your case to God and leave the vengeance to Him with whom it belongs. God says, vengeance is mine. We should never desire vengeance for our own sakes. Our desire for vengeance should be only at God's hand for His glory, that He be glorified. Verse 4 says, and He would not for a while. So this poor widow woman is pleading with this judge to give her justice, and it says He would not for a while. But afterward He said within Himself, though I don't fear God nor regard man, yet because this woman won't shut up, basically. Because she just continues. It troubles me. I'll avenge her. I'll give her due justice unless she just keep harping on me. She's wearing me down, he says. So first, you see, this judge wouldn't even listen to this woman. But after she went on and on and on daily about her problem, he finally considered the matter in his own mind. He thought about this woman's case, how frequently she's coming. He thought to himself, though I don't fear God, I don't have any regard for man. You know, this guy was a monster, wasn't he? He admits, I have no fear of God. I don't regard anyone else. You see, this judge only moved on this woman's request because she was so persistent. Because she was inconveniencing him. He didn't move because he pitied her. He didn't move because of obligation to his position. He moved out of his own selfishness. He just wanted her to shut up and go away. He didn't want to be disturbed anymore. Well, Jesus doesn't give us this parable to say that God's just like this, that if you bother Him, He's going to move on your account. But He gives this parable to show that God is different than this unjust judge. God is just. That God loves to answer our prayers, and He even helps us in praying with His Holy Spirit. That God's on your side when you pray. The unjust judge was against this woman. You know, in this parable, this woman had to overcome the judge's reluctance to help. And sometimes that's our attitude as we go in prayer. We think we have to overcome somehow. We have to pray much and often just to overcome God's reluctance to act on our behalf. That somehow we think if we're just persistent that we'll force God to move. But to think like that misses the point of the parable completely. Jesus didn't say that men should always pray and not lose heart, because he wasn't saying that because God's reluctant. The point Jesus was making is that we should always be in prayer. We shouldn't lose heart because God isn't reluctant like this judge. That God is just. He's not reluctant. And that should encourage us. That should entice us. That should draw us into prayer. And sometimes it does seem like God is reluctant, doesn't it? It seems like he's slow at answering our prayers, but yet the delay in his answer to our prayers are not needed by him. Sometimes the delay is needed by us to change our heart. Maybe give us time to correct what we're praying. Maybe give us time to appreciate when he does move. Maybe give us time to get in line with his will. Because our prayers aren't going to force God out to violate his own will. You know, if you're persistent in prayer, that alone will begin to transform your life. It'll begin to change you. Because as you're active in prayer, praying frequently, God's character begins to be built into you. He begins to build into you a heart that cares like he cares. There's so many contrasts here between this unjust judge and God. The judge was so unfair. God is completely fair. The judge had no personal interest in this widow. And on the other hand, God loves and cares for those who believe in his Son and petition him. The judge answers this widow's prayers out of his own self-interest. God answers prayers because he likes to do good for people. He likes to bless his children. Verse 6, and the Lord said, hear what the unjust judge says. And shall not God avenge his own elect, which cry day and night unto him, though he bear along with them? Jesus is saying God is completely trustworthy. That you don't have to be persistent in prayer to get him to move. He's trustworthy. And he will benefit those who call on him. His timing's perfect, even when the answers come slower than we would wish. His timing is always perfect. When you pray with confidence, just knowing that it is coming. You know, sometimes your prayer might be answered years behind you, and you've forgotten you prayed for it. But God hadn't forgot your prayers. Jesus shared a similar truth in Luke chapter 11 in the parable about the friend that came knocking at midnight. He summarized that parable by saying, and I say unto you, ask and it shall be given to you, seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be opened to you. For everyone that asks receives, he that seeks finds, and him that knocks it shall be opened. If a son asks bread of any of you that is a father, will he give him a stone? If he asks a fish, will he give him for a fish a serpent? If he asks for an egg, will he offer him a scorpion? If ye then being evil know how to give good gifts unto your children, how much more shall your heavenly Father give the Holy Spirit to them that ask him? It's God's pleasure to give those who ask. So don't walk away from this parable thinking God is like the unjust judge. He's nothing like the unjust judge. The unjust judge moved out of selfishness. God moves out of selflessness. God wants to bless you. And sometimes he's just waiting for you to open the door of blessing through your prayers. Sometimes you're not getting blessing because you're not asking. Sometimes God's wanting to do things for you, but he won't violate your will. And he waits for you to ask. He knows ahead of time what you need. He knows what you need 6 months from now. As I look back, those of you who know about the goings on with David Wandera in Africa, I say, God, you're amazing. That David's support failed, and God knew it was coming, and he had me write a story, which I don't usually write stories, and he had me send them to 2 newspapers. He had the one pick up the story in Rochester where a certain church in Lyers Ford would see it and get interested in Africa. And when David, almost a year later, when David's support failed, that this church in Lyers Ford was ready to pick them up. He knew their need before they did. He knew their need before Amos did, and he put those things in place. He's so amazing. Jesus said, your Father knows what you have need of before you ever ask him. It's often through prayer that you acknowledge to God what he already knows. You ask. Prayer is a tool that God uses to get his will done on earth. Your prayers will be answered as long as they're in line with God's will. Your prayers will be in line with God's will if you're in his word, if you're in prayer, if you're in conversation with him. So this is a parable of contrast that Jesus uses to teach. And Jim, I'm about done if you're ready to come up. And the contrast is if this unjust judge can be moved into action by the persistence of this widow, Jesus says, shall not God move speedily? Shall not God avenge his children speedily? He can, and he will. Verse 8 says, I tell you that he will. Jesus says he will avenge him speedily. Then he asks this question. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, shall he find faith on the earth? Almost seems like it's plunked down out of context. But yet it's not. If there are none given to prayer, will there be any of faith? Jesus is saying, I'm encouraging you to be people of prayer, but are you listening? Are you listening? Will you be a person of prayer? Will you be a person of faith? Will you be a person in a relationship with Jesus Christ? He wants to bless you. If you'll just get out of the way. As we close, may you be a person who's in frequent prayer with our Creator, with Jesus Christ. He so desperately wants that relationship with you. My gosh, he died on the cross to have a relationship with you, to set things back, to restore things. If you want him to be a part of your daily life, once you start conversing with him about your daily life, let him be in the conversation of your life. May you abide in Jesus Christ. May his word abide in you. May God show you his truth, his mercy in great abundance. I say over and over and over. The world is so darkening. It needs some people with light of the gospel in them. That the world has many ministers of darkness. There are all those people who try to put doubt in your head. All those people who talk about the bar scene. They're all ministers of Satan. They're all pushing an agenda. I'm fed up with it. It's time we be ministers of light. It's time we be a salt of the world. It's time we be a candle lit and shining on a hill. It's time we knock the basket away. Go with God. Go with Jesus. Go be a blessing. The world needs you.